clarify, I'm not going to be talking about the House of Lords today. I'm going to be talking about parasites in nature. Anyway, but yeah, thank you for the venue, actually. To be honest, ever since I was younger, I'd spend my time combing through encyclopedias that I found around the house or in the school library. And obviously now I'm able to share it with all of you, but back then I'd only have my sister to talk to, who would be subjugated to my endless barrage of monotonous facts about the latest animal I saw in the book. Anyway, show of hands, who thinks they know what parasite is? A show of hands, who actually knows what In nature, there's a phenomenon observed called symbiosis. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with that word. Symbiosis entails 3 different types of relationships between animals. Mutualism, where both animals work together and both benefit. Commensalism, where one benefits from the other, but not necessarily at the other's expense. And parasitism, where one benefits at the other's expense. And today I'll be going through the first. First of all, I need to go over the different types of parasites. Most commonly, you'll have obligatory parasites. Parasites which require a host organism in order to complete their life cycle. From there, there's also obligatory reproductive parasites, which require a host organism to pass on their young. And finally, on kind of more boring side, there are facultative parasites, which are parasites that are opportunistic in their parasitism. They don't require a host to carry on their life cycle, but if it benefits them in the moment, they might as well. First on the list, the tongue-eating louse. Tongue-eating louse is an obligatory isopod parasite that preys on various fish species in the ocean. If it finds a suitable host, the louse latches on to the tip of the tongue of a fish with a vice-like grip, drawing blood out of it. Eventually, the tip of the tongue atrophies from blood loss and explodes. At this point, the louse replaces the tip of the tongue as the fish's new tongue and gets a free meal anytime the fish manages to hunt something. The fish, of course, has no choice but to let this louse remain as its tongue, because if it were to lose the louse, it wouldn't be able to eat.
Makes sense.
Another type of obligatory reproductive parasite would be it's not really a specific organism. There's a genus of parasitoid wasps. In specific, I'm going to be talking about the C. floridulum. Now, the C. floridulum is nothing remarkable. It's just your average wasp if you were to look at it. But when it comes to laying eggs and ensuring the best chances of survival for its young, it will find a caterpillar or any sort of similarly bodied insect and sting it multiple times. Now, all wasp stings contain venom, and the venom works to paralyze whatever it's just stung, which works to immobilize the caterpillar. However, the sting doubles as an ovipositor. And this is important because once the caterpillar has been stung, the wasp deposits its eggs into the insides of the caterpillar. From then on, they will hatch and eat the caterpillar from the inside out. What's really fascinating about this is that the wasp naturally carries an insect form of something comparable to HIV. This is important because, like with most organ transplants, if the immune system of a body detects a foreign body inside of it, it will try to expel it. So, this type of pathogen is necessary so the eggs aren't expelled from the body of the caterpillar. Next, I want to move on to behavioral altering parasites. Now, most pathogens, or anything really smaller than about 30 microns, will be a parasite in some way, shape, or form, and normally these will be the types of pathogens that cause things like cold or any sort of disease. But Toxoplasma, the one I'm going to talk about now, is an amoeba that is able to alter the brain functions of rats. Now, these types of amoebozoid parasites require 3 things to carry on their life cycle. warmth, moisture, and the digestive tract of an animal, which happens to have those other two things. Toxoplasma will start its life cycle in the digestive tract of a cat, which will then be excreted once the cat finishes digesting whatever it's been eaten. These excretions are then routinely eaten by small rodents, such as rats, which will then end up in the digestive tract of said rat. Here, Toxoplasma creates proteins which mess with the instincts of the self-preservation instincts that the rat has, causing the rat to be less cautious around predators, like cats. Some have been observed to approach them, making them more likely to be eaten, which means that Toxoplasma is more likely to end up in the digestive tract of a cat to carry on its life cycle. Another really interesting one is the Gordian worm, or the horsehair worm. I'm sure a lot of you might have seen videos online of some kind of like hair-like thing slithering out of an insect or something that was in the water. Gordian worms similarly also require the digestive tract of an animal in order to carry on their life cycle. But Gordian worms are interesting in that they don't need to reproduce within the organism. They can do that in the water. But being the worms that they are, they don't have a lot of defenses, and so need to stay inside an organism in order to protect themselves. The organism of choice is usually a cricket. The way they get to these crickets is by laying their eggs in the water, which will be eaten by tiny flying nymph-like insects that are eventually eaten by crickets. But the thing is, they need to get back to the water, and crickets don't swim, as far as I know, because they risk drowning. But the Gordian worm is able to bypass this by, again, producing proteins that scramble the cricket's navigational center in the brain, causing it to go towards water, eventually drowning itself, allowing the horsehair worm to slither out and mate and lay eggs. Interesting story about the Gordian worm. Evolutionary biologist and parasitologist Frederick Thomas, in 2006, heard reports from New Zealand about suicidal crickets drowning themselves in waters. Now, this was before the whole field of neuroparasitology, where the parasite controls the organism's brain. This was before that field, and he thought this was definitely the work of some insidious parasite. So he tried to get funding, but it was a scientific community, and funding isn't very abundant for them. So, like most French people, what he did is he went on strike. Hunger strike specifically. He sent a letter to the President of France telling him that he would not go off of his hunger strike until he received funding to travel to New Zealand to study these worms. And the letter reached the French government, and he managed to catch the attention of the government, who promptly sent some bigwigs to his university to tell him to shut up. This was not important. Now, eventually, this caught the attention of some pompous Swiss billionaire who agreed to partly fund the project. So he flew off to New Zealand with his team and went to go study the worms. Unfortunately, the species of cricket he was supposed to be studying is really, really difficult to track in the wild, and he wasn't able to gather enough data to complete his results. So he had to walk away from New Zealand defeated, or fly away from New Zealand defeated. But he managed to take a picture of one of the worms and posted it on the board of his university break room. However, in the university break room, the picture caught the attention of the cousins of one of the scientists, I do not know how he got there, who cleaned pools for a living. And he reported that he had seen numerous crickets drowning themselves in the pools, and an abundance of these worms in the pools that he was cleaning. So he told this to Frederick, who gave him a jar and said, "Okay, can you collect some of these worms for me? Come back in a week." And Frederick thought that was going to be the end of it. He thought he was going to run off with the jar. Oh, I don't see why you want a jar, but he thought he wasn't going to come back. But a week later, the pool cleaner returns with a jar full of these worms. They were in France the whole time. The next morning, his wife is delighted to find out that he's booked them a surprise getaway to a luxury resort with pool included. And he spends the next few days studying the worms to his heart's content and posts his journal in the, the scientific journal Nature. I've read the article. The flamboyant and rambunctious language he uses to describe the parasites is amazing. For a biologist, it's crazy. Alright. So this next one is known as the frog mutating flatworm. It's an obligatory parasite, requires these frogs, and what it does is, similarly to toxoplasma, it requires the digestive tract of an animal in order to carry on its life cycle. This one particularly uses herons, because it's just the environment it grew up in. What it does is the flatworm will find tadpoles present in the water that it lives in, and embed itself into the still growing nub of their developing limbs. As the tadpoles develop into froglets, the limbs become mutated in a sense and malform, and you get, there was one observed case of an 8-legged frog, but normally it will be anywhere from more than 4 to lower than 8. And these frogs are horribly deformed on purpose so that they swim slower, because when they swim slower, they're more likely to be caught by herons, which means it's more likely for the flatworm to end up in the tract of a heron. Horrible business, really.
We're going to stop before humans, right?
Well, there are thousands and thousands of species of parasites that occupy humans without you knowing. Well, so far you haven't noticed them yet, so I think it'll be fine.
That's for next month.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you will have at least heard of the show on HBO, The Last of Us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't like it. It's really bad. I think it's a really bad adaptation of the video game. The video game was great. It won Game of the Year like last year. I think it's really nice. But the star of that show, the Orpheocordyceps mushroom, is the parasite in question. Now, in the show, the parasite has mutated beyond parasitizing regular insects and has infiltrated the food supply of us humans and is able to mind control us. Of course, this wouldn't happen in real life because the core body temperature of a human is too high for the mushroom to survive. But in insects in various jungles, when a spore comes into contact with, most normally it will be an ant, the mushroom grows inside the ant, eventually killing it. But before it does, it manages to take over its nervous system, causes it to wander around aimlessly, until eventually it finds maybe a leaf or a twig or something. The perfect conditions for the mushroom to start reproducing spores. At this point, the ant is where it needs to be, well, where the mushroom needs it to be, and the mushroom promptly kills it. From there, a long stalk grows out of the back of the neck of the ant, or at least where the thorax connects to the head, and releases its spores over a large area, so more ants can be parasitized. Finally, even plants are able to parasitize, which I thought was really, really amazing, because plants, to me, don't really possess much volition, but I guess they're also capable of this. And there are loads of really common ones like ivy or strangler figs, and those are, they're pretty simple. So for a really interesting one, I was thinking of the Rafflesia, or the corpse lily, the national flower of Indonesia. It's called as such because it smells like a corpse, and it requires to smell like a corpse because it attracts carrion flies which pollinate it. However, upon observation, you would see underneath the Rafflesia that it has no roots, no stem. It's just a flower. The flower itself takes root inside of another plant, parasitizing the resources that the plant has. But more interestingly, the DNA of the plant is also parasitized. Now, we're not really sure how they managed to do this, but we know why, and it's normally to do with the fact that the immune system of the plant wouldn't reject the Rafflesia. But it's a really interesting process which hasn't really been observed anywhere else. And it too is an obligatory parasite. Finally, well, this is the first facultative parasite that I have, because they're not really interesting, except this one. The brain-eating amoeba. Now, the brain-eating amoeba has gained some traction in terms of the public eye of the media in recent months, I guess, but How does it actually eat the brain? Well, the amoeba itself is present in most freshwater lakes around the world, and it's really happy just eating whatever's in the lake. However, with obviously global warming, its numbers have increased, and let's say you do swim in a lake with the brain-eating amoeba in it, most likely you'd be fine. It only affects a few hundred people a year. The issue stems if you manage to get lake water up your nose, and I mean all the way up your nose. Because at the very top of your nose are your olfactory nerves, which connect via the olfactory bulb to your to the olfactory center in the brain. And by sheer evolutionary coincidence, the exact same chemical that activates the hunting kind of reflex, I guess you could say, of the amoeba with the antigens on its surface is the same neurotransmitter we use in our noses, as from the nerves of the nose. So when the amoeba is in your nose, those neurotransmitters activate it and cause it to search what is producing them. It travels from your olfactory nerves, up your olfactory bulb, through into your olfactory cortex. And here it will obviously face some resistance from your immune system, and in most cases the immune system will manage to kill it. If it manages to get through, however, it will reach your brain, where it can feast on your neurons to its heart's content. There's nothing there to stop it, until maybe in a few days' time your immune response finally kicks in, and your immune cells come to try and stop it. Unfortunately for you, your immune system is not very good at discerning between your body and the pathogen. So in trying to kill the brain-eating amoeba, it will eventually cause irreparable damage to your brain, causing you to die within about a week of the amoeba entering your nose. Freshwater. Pretty much.
Behind you, Dan.
Yeah. But you shouldn't have to worry about it.
You should. Killed while swimming to this group.
Parasites, as grim as they are incredibly successful with this method. And parasitologists and evolutionary biologists everywhere will tell you that parasites